Whenever you're ready. Hello, my name is Karen, and my TED Talk today is talking about the mantra or saying of forgive and forget, and why I believe the end portion, because I do think forgiveness is what we're called to do and it's good, but the end portion of forget is not what we should be doing. So I thought it would be a good idea to start with a quote that I think kind of ties some of this together. It says, true forgiveness doesn't erase the wrongdoing, but rather frees the person who was hurt. I know we're talking about the forgetful part and not the forgiving part, but I think it's important to begin with understanding what forgiveness actually is. And forgiveness, in a sense of how we're forgiven by God, is for us, the forgivee, to feel that love and freedom found in God. But I think as the forgiver, as humans, it is more for us to show freedom and in that process of becoming more like Jesus, forgive as he has forgiven us. So I thought it'd be cool to start off. So here are the 5 reasons that I believe we should not forgive and forget. I'm going to go into depth on all of them, but I'll just read them out for you real quick. It says, number 1 is moving on and grief takes time. Number 2, it is impossible to forget fully. Number 3, memory is necessary for daily forgiveness. And number 4, God calls us to reconcile. And number 5, it's invalidating to the victim. So we're going to start with moving on and grief takes time. I know the whole forgiving thing is a little tricky and nuanced because we forgive daily and constantly because lots of things happen, little things, big things, a lot of things happen. And I think this grief cycle and this taking time and what I'm talking about today is less for the small things, which are still important to forgive and to work through that process, a little bit more of the bigger, more traumatic experiences in which the mantra forgive and forget can be really hurtful to the victim and to the person who hurt them. So moving on does take time. A lot of you probably have already seen this grief cycle before. It starts with denial, ends with acceptance. This is just very studies have shown that this is how the human brain and emotions work and process, and it's not always cookie cutter the same every single time. It takes a lot of time. I know personally in my life, my whole life has been surrounded with the idea of forgiveness and reconciliation, and it's been a really huge topic in my life, learning and feeling convictions for that and how to forgive and how to reconcile in a way that's honoring to God. And so my personal process of some big experiences happened in my life. This process took 2 years. Sometimes it takes 2 weeks. Sometimes it takes your whole life. But as long as there's growth, then you realize that the cycle is continuing and happening. And I think an easy way to track that growth is to seek counsel and seek people higher and wiser than you. Because sometimes you don't always see your growth, or sometimes you see it too much where there isn't actually enough growth. So this cycle is really cool to just kind of track where you're at in your forgivingness, but also not forgettingness. So point number 2 is it is impossible to forget fully. Now this is pretty blatant statement and might seem a little hard to back up. But I think if you look into studies and you look into things, there are things that show that our body doesn't forget. There's post-traumatic stress disorder, which shows that your brain does not forget and your emotions do not forget. But there's also stuff about skin cells rebuilding and being a thing after every 7 years. And your body does not forget things that happen to you. And as much as you try and push it away, you will keep feeling it, but not understanding why. So recognizing that your body and your brain will not forget things that happen to you is very important. So next point is memory is necessary for daily forgiveness. This kind of goes back to the last point a little bit, but I have a couple other things to say about it. This also is talking a little bit more about forgiveness and less of the forgetfulness. But when you are in the process of forgiving, it's not saying daily forgiveness as in you get to choose some days that you don't want to forgive this person, that you want to stay angry at them that day. But like I said before, your body remembers, your brain remembers, things trigger trauma, things trigger hurt and pain. And because that happens so much, you need to recognize that when that happens, you are choosing to forgive each time. You are saying, yes, this still hurts. Yes, I still feel this, but yes, I will forgive again and again because this is what God calls me to do. And so that memory is very essential, because if you forget, then you'll just get triggered and lash out for no reason and not understand why your body is telling you, you need to keep forgiving. You need to keep working through this because this is now a part of you. So that's really important. So the next point is that God calls us to reconcile. I think it's very clear in the Bible that God calls us to forgive, but there are actually big debates on whether or not God calls us to always reconcile. And I've gotten in a lot of hard conversations with people that it's a very nuanced topic, that reconciliation isn't as clear in the Bible as forgiveness. But I would argue reconciliation is just as clear as forgiveness in the Bible. So we can see in Hebrews 12:14, we are called to make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. This effort to live in peace isn't just, you have to be best friends with this person that hurt you deeply, but you have to live in peace, whatever that looks like, and not just do nothing, but make effort to live in peace. Whatever that could look like in closure and talking about things and getting uncomfortable and being able to speak well of someone, to pray for someone, and to live in community with someone if that's what's necessary. There are situations where living in peace does look like distance and does look like that, but you need to make sure that hate in your heart and that hurt in your heart is worked through, and that we can live in peace and to pursue holiness as God has called us to. The next verse I want to look at is Matthew 5:24. It says, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. So we can see even in the gospel story as well as this, that like there is separation from us and God because of the fall and because of Adam and Eve's decision to sin. And because of that, there's distance, and we need something to come in between. That looked like sacrifice, that looked like offerings in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, it looked like Jesus coming down and paying the ultimate sacrifice. But even here, we see in Matthew that people are trying to offer things to God. They're trying to close that gap themselves, but they are not reconciled with the people in their lives. They are not coming with a pure, clean heart to the Lord. And we even see this in communion. There's often a lot of preachers at church, just like, we have a moment of repentance and a moment of confession of sin before we come to the table and we come to the Lord, because we must be reconciled to the best of our abilities. Like it says in Hebrews, we're not going to get it perfect. We're not going to be fully good, but whatever we know and feel in our heart that needs to be reconciled, we need to reconcile that to God. And so I thought that was cool to look at. And then the passage in Romans is just another thing. We do a lot of things. We forgive because God forgave. We love because God loved. But we also reconcile because God reconciled. And so it says, for while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his son. How much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life? The whole process of the gospel and God sending his son is the process of reconciliation between God and his people. And with the death of the son, we can be spiritually reconciled with him. We don't have to do anything. We're justified through that. But eventually we'll be physically reconciled to him. And just the whole process of the gospel is reconciliation. And so if we do all these things because God has done it, why shouldn't we reconcile because God has done it? And I see the topic of reconciliation as being a direct contrast of forgetfulness, because forgetfulness, while it can, the motive of it could be for growth and for healing. In secular Western society, it is very individualistic. Like, forget this, I'm going to move on and do my thing. This happened, but we don't have to work on that. We're forgetting. Versus God calls us to step into our hearts and step into the hard situations and reconcile them. So the last topic is, it's invalidating to the victim. This kind of encompasses the whole idea I'm trying to get at, that we forgive because it frees us and it's pleasing and honoring to God, but we also reconcile because it's healthy for everyone in the situation. We don't forget because forgetting, like this quote says, the idea of forgiving and forgetting, wiping the slate clean, feels like becoming accomplices in their abusers' crimes. This can seem very dramatic, in a sense, for like, oh, you hurt my feelings, you didn't give me a high five. you're my abuser and I'm an accomplice in your crime if I forget this. But a little bit more deeper subjects, I think, is we're talking about just allowing yourself as a victim to not dwell in victimhood, but to recognize that things have happened to you that shape who you are today. And just choosing to forget that is just very invalidating to you. It's very invalidating to the person you are and to how you can use what has happened to you to glorify God better in your testimony and to reach out and relate to others as well. So I think this has been just such a huge topic in my life of just reconciling and forgiving. And it's a really big thing. And I just want to challenge everyone to look into their lives at what needs to be reconciled and what that could look like. And it's not going to look the same for everybody. But I believe that listening to the Holy Spirit's convictions and talking to higher counsel and higher authority wiser than you can really help just fill that gap of reconciliation in your life, whatever that may look like. And I challenge you to not just love as God loved or forgive as God forgave, but to reconcile as God has.